All right, well, good morning, everyone. Mark Wilson here at the Florida Chamber Foundation, and we're going to officially get started. So Karen Moore, who is the chair of the Florida Chamber Foundation. Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. Welcome. Good morning to each of you. We have a record number of attendees on the program today. So we're excited to share with you some really important numbers. So why are we here? We have over 700,000 children living in poverty. And so it's important that we have a report that outlines the numbers, and it's clearly showing that we have some good news and some challenging news. Fewer children in poverty, but was really interesting that came out, and you will hear in the report today, is some counties saw a decrease in childhood poverty and some saw an increase. I'd love for you to listen to this report. The data is going to be very clear. And if it speaks to you, I hope that you will want to join us in this poverty initiative that we have and take action. You can access the report with this code right here, or at the end, we'll also give you information on Katrina Donahue, who can answer any questions. We have leaders from across the state who have said this is an important issue for our state, and it's an important issue for our business. And so we all know on this call to address the issue of childhood poverty, it's got to be taken up by the business community. And I really want to acknowledge and thank the Prosperity Initiative Advisory Board. You see, we have leaders from across the state. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your leadership. You know, the Prosperity Initiative is something that is personally very near and dear to my heart. At the Moore Agency, after hearing the information that came out about the poverty at the zip code level, we decided to take action. And in fact, we turned all of our resources, our talent investment, and our philanthropic activities to address childhood poverty in the zip code 32304. And so I do want to give a shout out to President Jim Murdoch. He is the president of Tallahassee State College. He stepped up on day one and said, my college is in that zip code, and I will step up and be the zip code leader there. So we need a zip code leader in every single zip code in the state of Florida, but certainly the ones that have the highest number of children in poverty would be my priorities. I do want to thank the speakers that we have on today's call. You will see that we have those that are really invested in ensuring that we understand the situation, we've got the data, and we've got action options and opportunities in order to see to it that this is one of the significant issues that the Chamber has taken on in our state. And let me tell you, here's how you absolutely need to get involved. 2 months from today, we have the 2026 Florida Prosperity and Economic Opportunity Solution Summit. I think if we could add a couple more words in there, we could really have a tongue twister. But the important thing is it's in Tampa. It's 2 months from today, June 9. It is going to be really looking holistically about the situation. The not-for-profit community, the business community, state government, local, regional. What do we need to do? And more important, there are best practices taking place across the state, and you can learn how you might be able to duplicate them in your community. I'm signing up for it. I'm signing up several of my staff to attend. I hope you'll join us also. Mark your calendar today. I'm going to turn the program over now to our president and CEO, Mark Wilson.
All right. Well, good morning, Karen, and thank you so very much for not only chairing the Florida Chamber and kicking off today's call, but thank you for what you and the Moore Agency are doing across Florida and specifically in 32304, delivering 50,000 meals to families to help with our food insecurity root cause in one zip code is pretty awesome. And when I think about what makes Florida special, we have the best volunteers of any Chamber of Commerce in the country. And while we're working on growing Florida to be the 10th largest economy in the world, how cool is it that our Secretary of Commerce and Senator Calatayud and all of you are working together today to think through how can we be the first state in America where we view cutting childhood poverty in half as economic development, it's community development, and it's just a really important part of Florida's story. So what I want to do is I want to set the stage a little bit, and then I want to introduce our senior research economist, Sheridan Morby, who is going to walk you through this brand new report that compares where we used to be on childhood poverty to where we are now on the most recent report. And most importantly, for the rest of the discussion and for our summit on June 9, what can we all do to accelerate the reduction in childhood poverty, get their parents into the workforce, and break this cycle of generational poverty? So this started about a decade ago. Members of Congress realized what the Florida Chamber Foundation was doing. We were talking about diversifying our economy, but in the same sentence, we were talking about cutting childhood poverty in half. And there was a welfare reform conversation going on in the country, and there was a strong interest by members of Congress to say, hey, what's Florida doing here? This doesn't feel like a government program. This feels like a way to eradicate generational poverty and really bring people into the economic opportunity that free enterprise brings. So I just want to remind everybody that this started when we were invited to come share the Florida model, which is our zip code model, with members of Congress. And I had the privilege, you can check the congressional record if you want to see the testimony. I had the privilege, the Florida Chamber was literally the first group in the nation that was asked to come present our ideas of how the private sector could actually change the game. We have a couple 100,000 fewer kids in poverty today than we did when we started this initiative. And as Karen said, 983 zip codes, we're looking for business leaders to be the leader, the manager of their zip code. And you're going to hear from Michelle Hamilton from Florida Blue later. Florida Blue has stepped up in a massive way and is leading several zip codes in Florida. And so between what Karen's doing, what David Odehowski's doing, what Michelle's doing, what we really want to do is raise awareness to what these leaders are doing so we can replicate it and scale it in every single zip code throughout Florida. Big picture, as I mentioned, we're on a 10-year run. We started in 2019. The 2030 blueprint says how can we become the 10th largest economy in the world by 2030. As a reminder, we're 15 right now. We just passed Spain, and we're on our way to be top 10. We don't have time today to go into all 39 goals, but I do want to focus us in on 3 that are absolutely related to the success of our Prosperity Initiative. And again, our partners like Senator Calatayud, who you're going to hear from later, and also Alex Kelly, our Commerce Secretary, who I had a meeting with earlier this morning, all of these are important to Florida's future economic opportunities. So how do we cut childhood poverty in half? How can we be the first state in the country where 100% of our kindergartners are ready for kindergarten on day 1? And then, of course, the work of our Business Alliance for Early Learning, our partners at the Children's Movement and other partners. How can we be the first state in the country where 100% of our third graders are reading at or above grade level? And then also, let me go to the next one here. Hopefully, if you're receiving our newsletter for our Prosperity Initiative, this isn't news to anybody, but the media has been covering our work pretty significantly of late. And so if anyone's not receiving our newsletter, if you haven't been seeing the media pick up, one way that we can get our story out about what the business community is doing to cut poverty in half is to make sure that the local numbers are available for local TV, for local radio, for local print, for social media. And this has become a very big deal lately. As Karen said, our statewide conference 2 months from today. So we'll be talking a whole lot more about it between now and then. We talked about the importance of zip codes and how important our zip code model is. Folks, 711,000 kids in poverty in Florida, but more than half of them live in only 15% of our 983 zip codes. And so 152 zip codes is where half of our kids in poverty are. In the picture there, you see our relatively new statewide director of our Prosperity Initiative, Heather Kogar. She and Christina are working together. I'll talk more about them in a minute, but that's our Attorney General, James Uthmeier, and James and Heather have been working closely together on an initiative to keep kids safe at the community level, and that's why the Florida Sheriff's Association is one of our newest partners. Attorney General Uthmeier will be one of our keynote speakers at our June 9 summit to talk about this important partnership about how to keep kids safe. In terms of data that's available, we don't have time to go through all 983 zip codes or all 67 counties, but I just want to give you an example of what this looks like at a county level. So Broward County, where I was a keynote speaker last month, Broward County has over 63,000 kids in poverty, and they have 55 zip codes. Half of all the kids in poverty in Broward are in only 10 zip codes. And so that's where a big focus could be, right? One of their zip codes, 33311, has more kids in poverty than any other zip code in all of Florida, with over 7,500 kids in poverty. And would love to talk more about that, but we have this for every county in Florida. So if you're interested in having a community prosperity roundtable in your county to get your superintendent, your sheriff, your local chamber, your United Way together with our team, we would absolutely love to come to your county and bring this kind of data so we can talk about how we can pinpoint our philanthropy and pinpoint results. Also, when I testified in Congress, we had done some work with the Federal Reserve and with the United Way nationally, and we discovered there are really 10 root causes of poverty. These are the 10 causes that can make it really hard for somebody to get out of generational poverty, or they could send any of us on this call into poverty. If we lose our health, as an example, there's a chance you're going right into poverty. So 10 root causes in every single zip code of Florida. That's the Florida model. That's where we're headed. I mentioned Heather and Christina earlier. We've actually expanded our team. We now have 2 full-time teammates. For those of you who are on the board and want to get involved at that level, Christina manages our communications monthly and also our board development. Heather Kogar joined our team about 6 months ago. You probably know she grew up in foster care. She broke the cycle of poverty, and now she's traveling Florida leading a lot of our county level prosperity roundtables as well as our zip code level development. Some of you who are Leadership Florida alumni know that she's also been asked to be a keynote speaker on the main stage at Leadership Florida this June. So our Prosperity Initiative will get a big awareness boost there as well. And then almost ready to turn this over to Sheridan here in a second. This is what a community level prosperity roundtable looks like. This is a recent one in Citrus County. The sheriff hosts it every month. They're small. Again, it's the superintendent of schools, it's the United Way, it's the local chamber, it's the sheriff, and they're having a real conversation about what's happening at the county level and what needs to happen at the zip code level. And then finally, the data that Karen mentioned, and I know we're going to talk about throughout the call, 983 zip codes. I really want to give kudos to Metropolitan Ministries and Tim. Last year at our conference, he revealed that Metropolitan Ministries, prior to using the Florida Chamber's Gap Map, was investing millions of dollars into the Tampa Bay area. But after looking at where the needs are, they redirected millions of dollars using our data that we're going to talk about in a minute into the parts of the community where it could make the biggest difference. And I know a lot of businesses are interested not in spending more money and more time, but how to spend it better as is the legislature. And so with that said, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is one of the most important initiatives in America, not just in Florida. So I'm going to turn the program over to our senior research economist, Sheridan Morby, who's going to walk through what the report says and give us a perspective of it. So thanks. Sheridan, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. So as he mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the data surrounding these poverty numbers and the reality of what's happening in Florida, especially through the lens of the report that we put out. So we put out our new State of Childhood Poverty report in Florida for 2026. And so I'm going to dive into it a little bit, but if you really want to dig in even further, that is on our website. So a little bit of level setting for this report. When we talk about poverty numbers and what the reality is in Florida, we're talking about some U.S. Census data. This is data that is used across the country. This is the authority on what these numbers are. It's released annually. That's why we talk about new numbers every year. And we have it at both the county and the zip code level. So we're able to look at not only the country, the state, the county, but really down to the community level. And we get a few different areas that we can look through, lenses we can look through with this: age, educational attainment, home ownership, disability status, and more. And so we've broken down a good amount of those. You can see not just the reality of poverty for the entire state and for all Floridians, but what does it mean for them by age? We're talking about childhood poverty, educational attainment, and all that. And all the data that I talk about is reported on the Florida scorecard at the county level and then on the Florida Gap map at the zip code level. So high level look, we broke this down by county. Overall at the state level, childhood poverty decreased by about 0.4 percentage points compared to last year. And that's about 3,192 kids, less children that are in poverty. And when we're talking about these numbers, we like to talk about specifically 3,192 kids, because when we're talking about these statistics, it's real people, real kids, and so that's why these numbers are so important and why we're so exact in our research. So looking by the county level, the county with the highest childhood poverty rate is Gadsden County. It's about 41.4%. So you're getting close to almost half of the children in Gadsden County being in poverty. And you can look at St. Johns County, that's the lowest. It's about 6.5% of the children there are in poverty. And it's interesting, I won't dive into this, but if you look at some of those education scores, St. John's leads in a lot of different areas when it comes to third grade reading, kindergarten readiness. And so you already can see how all of this is tied together when you're starting to look at other indicators. Mark talked about other goals that we have in the Florida 2030 blueprint. And so that's why this is all interconnected. You can also look at the change over time over the last year. So these are counties that might not necessarily be ranked among the top or the lowest when it comes to the childhood poverty rate, but they've seen significant changes. So the highest percentage of childhood poverty decline of any county, so improvement, is about 18%, a drop of 18% in Hamilton County, compared to the largest percentage of childhood poverty increase since the year prior is Hardee County. It was an increase of about 5.2%. I want to dive a little bit deeper into Gadsden County. We said that was the highest percentage of childhood poverty. And at the county level, we can see that it is that highest level, about 41%, but you can dig a little deeper to see how concentrated that is at the zip code level. So in Gadsden County, there are 7 zip codes, but half of those children who live in poverty are in about just 2 zip codes. And you can look at those other metrics that are also related. So we talked about third grade reading. There are 227 children not reading at grade level in Gadsden County, and half of those are in just 3 schools. Look again at Alice households. I'll touch on those a little bit later. 40% at the county level, and then over half, about half of the households are Alice and 1 zip code, 32330. Similarly, you can look at enrollment as well. Childhood enrollment for those ages 3 and 4-year-olds in school, it's a little bit over half in Gadsden County. And then if you look down to a specific level, looking at 32324, it's about 45%. So I mentioned declines in poverty. We were looking at Hamilton County, the highest decline in childhood poverty. We have this within the report for the top 10 counties. And so we have the highest top 10 counties for the percentage of decline. So these are those counties that might not have the most number of children, so they might not be seeing the same magnitude in terms of the drops, but they're seeing significant percentage drops. So improvements. And then we also have the top 10 by the number of children. And so Hillsborough County saw almost 4,000 children less who are in poverty. in the county over the year. And so again, don't need to read all these right now because we have that in the report. And so you can go in and see where is your county in these metrics. And we saw that 33 of the counties, so just under half, had a reduction in poverty levels. Shifting focus now to the increases. So this is where childhood poverty was getting worse in that sense. So again, we have it by the percentage increase. So Hardee County increased by about 5% in terms of their childhood poverty rate. And if you looked back, it's important to keep in mind Hamilton County, their biggest improvement was a drop of 18%. So we saw a lot of improvement in that way at the county level. You're looking at this increase in childhood poverty in Hardee County, it's an increase of about 5%. So the magnitude of those changes aren't the same. We're seeing higher magnitude when it comes to the improvement in childhood poverty. And then you can look at, again, those highest numbers. Alachua County, Osceola County, St. Lucie, those are seeing the highest increases in childhood poverty. And so, again, I encourage you to look at the report to really dig down into what's happening in your county. So we can go from the county level all the way down to the zip code level. And so Mark mentioned this, that over half of Florida's children in poverty live in just 15% of Florida's zip codes, about 152 zip codes. And so that means that the data is very highly concentrated. And so something to note here is we talk about data, but data is really just the starting point. We can show you the counties, the zip codes that have those highest levels, but really when we're talking about changing that, that's when promising practices, talking to other business leaders and community leaders, and government officials who are working to end this poverty really comes in. And so talking about that Prosperity and Economic Opportunity Summit, that's when we get people in the room. So you can start with this data, you can see over half of the children in poverty really concentrated. But if you want to see how children can come out of poverty, that's where sitting at a table next to someone who's seen improvement in their zip code can really help someone who's seen those declines or seen those higher concentrated levels of poverty, childhood poverty in these zip codes. Not only do we have over half and 15% of zip codes, even within that, we're seeing it highly concentrated within just a few counties. So of those 152 zip codes that have that highest concentrated levels of children in poverty, Miami-Dade has 27 of those 152. So you can see on that chart on the left, a very big chunk of those zip codes are in just one county. And then Broward, Duval, they also have a large amount. So looking at Miami-Dade, to put that in a little more context, the fact that Miami-Dade has such a concentrated amount of those zip codes, there are more children in poverty in Miami-Dade than there are 42 of Florida's 67 counties combined. So if you were to take the 42 lowest counties in Florida, combine them all, it's still less than the number that are in Miami-Dade. Also, if you want to stretch that out to the state level, Miami-Dade County has more children in poverty than 18 U.S. states do. And so we can see that that's a pretty significant portion. And really, that's why the zip code level matters, because if you really dig into what's happening at the community level, that's where you can see the reality and the highest concentration, and then start to have those promising practices and improvements in that area. Florida Gap Map is the best way to really be seeing this zip code level data. So we have zip codes broken out in the report, but we have every single zip code in Florida on the Florida Gap Map. And you can see both the percentage and the number of children in poverty. I pulled out just a few different zip codes here across the state. You can look at zip code 32206. About 43.2% of the children are in poverty. And then you look down to the left about Southwest Florida, 33901, it's about 18% of Florida's zip codes are in poverty. And then 32810, around 21%. And so you can see, especially looking at that Southwest Florida and then up there in Duval County, that those are pretty significant differences in the percentage of children who are in poverty. This was not me digging around trying to find zip codes that were pretty different. This is just looking at zip codes in a couple of counties, pull them out, look at the difference that you're seeing in the levels in poverty. That's a pretty consistent pattern across the state. And so as you're looking at your zip code, I also encourage you to look at the zip codes around yours, within the county, maybe neighboring counties, to see how you might be comparing to other zip codes and communities and seeing how you can work in partnership there. And again, Prosperity Summit is a big area where we've seen that happen. So I want to start breaking this down by a little bit more in terms of demographics, root causes. So one way we can look at this is Florida poverty rates by age range. So we talk about childhood poverty, but we can actually break that down even further. So we can look at under 18 years old, but we can also look at those under 5 years old and 5 to 17 years old. I really want to highlight that under 5 years age range because that is the largest or the highest poverty rate of any age range in Florida. About 18% in 2024 of children under 5 years old were in poverty. And this is pretty significant because something you can keep in mind here is children under 5 years old typically have parents who are earlier in their careers, younger parents, and that can point us towards what could be some of this that's contributing to those higher poverty rates. And this is where we come back to those root causes. So one root cause is unaffordable and unattainable childcare. Again, when you're seeing those high levels of poverty for children under 5 years old, it would make sense that the unaffordability of childcare is really leading that because those young parents who might not be able to afford childcare, that's ultimately going to lead a family into poverty, and that's why you see those young kids. And so I want to show this across the state. So Florida is about 13.4% of household income is spent on one infant in childcare. That's one child. So we're just talking about one kid. You see a lot of families have more than one child who are in childcare, and this, again, varies across the state. So Jackson County is the highest. It's about 17.8% of income in Jackson County is spent on childcare. Similarly, high levels, Escambia County, Baker County has a pretty high level as well. And so we can see that that's having a significant impact, especially when you then look at another root cause, unattainable housing. So that's another area that we see that contribute to poverty. So I want you to keep in mind 13.4% is the median share of household income spent on childcare. And then about 56.3% of people who are renting are housing cost burdened. So that means they're spending 30% or more of their income on housing. We look at rental here especially because the majority of people who are in poverty are renting their homes. So 13.4% spent on childcare, then you're looking at over half spending 30% of their income on housing. That's approaching half of their income on just two areas. And so that's why unattainable housing, unaffordable childcare are root causes that we talk about. Another area that we dive into in the report is the childhood poverty rate in rural versus non-rural counties. Being a rural or a non-rural county is not a root cause of poverty directly. You're not necessarily going to see higher levels just because a county is labeled as rural. But what you are seeing is that a lot of other root causes are correlated with that. So when you're talking about food insecurity, you can see that over 85% of the counties that have the highest levels of SNAP assistance are rural counties. And so those are counties that are seeing high poverty levels, and that's linked to that high food insecurity. And so at the Prosperity Summit, Sky Beard from No Kid Hungry is going to be talking about this and diving into specifically food deserts and then those innovative models that can tackle that. And so each of the speakers that we have on stage are not just going to be talking about here's the root cause, but here's innovative ways that we can overcome those root causes. Finally, I want to end on a measure that actually extends beyond the childhood poverty level conversation that we're talking about today. So within the report, we talk about those U.S. Census data points that I mentioned earlier, but we also talk about ALICE, this different measurement that United Way puts out that shows a bigger picture of those who are financially in need in the state. So if you look at the federal poverty level for a family of four, it's $30,000 at the state level. But that's at the national level, actually. So you're seeing that in every state, same level, about $30,000 to be in poverty. So that's a pretty low threshold to be in poverty, and we're still seeing these high percentages. What the ALICE threshold does is it extends that to a real estimate for cost of living. What does someone really need for their income if they're going to provide for their family and really be able to afford cost of living? And it also adjusts for where you are in the country, the state, the county. So looking at Florida's household survival budget for a family with 2 adults, 2 children, it's $86,000. So look at how that compares to $30,000 for just the federal poverty level. This also is adjusted specifically when it comes to the county. So we have this on the scorecard for every county, and those numbers really capture the reality of the county because it's adjusting for the cost of living there. So Gadsden County, which we talked about earlier, is about $80,000. St. John's is $98,000, so almost $100,000 that is needed for that household budget. So even more than the overall state level. And then Miami-Dade has the highest, about $103,000. In Leon County, about 89,000 where we're sitting right now. And so we can see that there are significant barriers beyond the poverty level, and so that's why you can't stop the conversation at just these poverty numbers. You have to dive deeper into ALICE thresholds and things like that as well. And so having a close partnership with United Way, we really get to dig into this data and extend those conversations beyond just poverty, and we'll be doing that at the summit as well on June 9th. So that was a lot of data in a short period of time, and so I really want to encourage you to look at the report, look at the scorecard, look at the gap map, because that's always being updated and really digs deeper into these topics. So with that, I will pass it back to Mark.
All right, great. Sheridan, thanks so much for that. I want to, two quick things. I want to acknowledge, really appreciate the conversation going on in the chat, and we're looking very closely at trends. We'll talk through that. Certainly at the summit. Sometimes it's a population thing. Sometimes there's really awesome things going on in the zip codes and counties. Again, Sheridan mentioned 34 counties saw an increase in childhood poverty, 33 a decrease. So we'll dig into that. Also, as I want to introduce now our Secretary of Commerce, Alex Kelly. And as I do, I just want to remind everybody what a special opportunity we have in Florida, where volunteers that are including childhood poverty in economic development, and to have a Commerce Secretary that does the same. Alex is going to talk about opportunity zones, and if you've never heard of them before, please pay close attention to this. Florida has an unbelievable opportunity to really infuse opportunity into these zip codes as we go forward. And I also want to remind everybody what I said at the beginning. Florida is being looked at across the country right now. We're number one for higher education. We're number one for business relocations. More businesses on a net basis are relocating here than any other state. We have more wealth moving to Florida every hour of every day. And even though we're winning in those categories, we have leaders, a state senator today, our Commerce Secretary. We're still looking at how can we also be the first state in the country to cut childhood poverty in half. So it's really pretty special to be part of this. So Secretary Kelly, thanks so much for investing a little bit of time with us this morning and for your partnership and your leadership. The floor is yours.
Mark, thanks so much. And everybody, thank you for the opportunity to talk about opportunity zones. And I couldn't have lined this up better than to follow Sheridan's presentation. And so I've got a few slides for you. Some of them I'm going to fly through pretty quickly, but I will tell you that there's a longer version of this presentation. I'll tell you at the outset that if anybody on this call wants to have us come talk to your organization, your community, we're doing a lot of public meetings on this topic already. We are more than happy to do more. It's very topical and timely. And so, with that, we'll jump into the presentation. If you could cue up the slides. But Mark, I want to stress at the opening of this that this is very practically oriented to exactly what we're talking about today: the Florida Gap Map, tackling childhood poverty. And for those of us who work in economic workforce development, one of the kind of things that you're probably very used to is when you have an opportunity to really create or generate or help out with a catalytic project that really kind of changes the fate of employment and job opportunities in a community. Oftentimes there's a multitude of tools that you might bring to the table: state tools, local tools, partnership, collaboration, maybe even some federal tools. This is a federal tool, and it's one that can be really, really important, I think, for getting investment into communities that perhaps haven't had that type of investment maybe ever. And that may be a key thing. And Mark, I want to stress too at the outset that, as you and I talk about sometimes, when we look at our work and we look at all the inputs and outputs and kind of, are we actually doing something? Are we actually in our work on a daily basis changing the results? Whether we're talking about, decreasing childhood poverty, or whether we're talking about increasing access to broadband, or decreasing the number of small business startups that fail. All of these things, I think, are ways to measure whether or not we're really truly having an impact. And I want to say that it's been a joy to work with the Florida Chamber on this initiative, because when I first took this job almost 3 years ago, time's flown, one of the first things that I did was actually infuse the Florida Chamber's Florida Gap Map into our broadband work. And it's made a profound difference in terms of helping us focus that work, again, making sure that we're making a difference. But we can go to the next slide. So, real quick, what is an opportunity zone? I know some are probably familiar, some this may be a new topic. Overall, an opportunity zone is an economic development tool. That's at its core, it's an economic development tool, and it's a way to improve financially the margins for people who might invest in economic development projects in all of your areas. We can go to the next slide. It's a tool that was created by Congress and President Trump originally during the first Trump administration, created in December 2017. All states, all 50 states implemented this in early 2018. And the Opportunity Zone program has come back and been extended and made permanent. The Opportunity Zone 1 program had a timeline to it that would have concluded this year in 2026. And so the original program, again, very in line with this discussion, was framed around communities that had a certain level of income, certain average income or below. And that program allowed every state in the country to designate census tracts. So a little bit different than a zip code, but that every state in the country was able to designate census tracts based on being at or below that income level as opportunity zones, as ways to secure and incentivize investment. And we can go to the next slide. Congress last summer, with the signature of President Trump, reauthorized and made permanent the Opportunity Zone program. You're going to hear me probably a lot, and you're going to hear our team quite a bit talk through what we call OZ 2.0, our Opportunity Zone 2.0, because the reenactment and permanence of the law is a little bit different than the first program. And some of those differences, I won't get overly detailed here, but some of those differences are really, really important, particularly for some of the topics you were just talking about, for example, for rural communities, and moreover, for securing long-term investment. So the program was reauthorized last summer. All states right now, including Florida, are in a time period where we're collecting input on what the program can look like. More specifically, recommendations for census tracts that can be designated as opportunity zones. There are some aspects of the law that are the same, but there are some significant differences. The basic framework of the law is that based on that income threshold, that there are certain census tracts in Florida that are at or below that threshold that are eligible to be designated census tracts. The Governor DeSantis, and every governor in the country get to pick 25% of the eligible census tracts in their states and designate them. So it's very competitive. So only 25% of the eligible census tracts can be designated. And that really means they need to be designated with a purpose. The law is still income-based. As you see on the slide, the income thresholds have actually tightened a little bit. They're actually lower income thresholds, meaning that, in other words, it's really focusing more and more on those areas where there's high rates of poverty. Again, communities probably where there has not been significant investment in capital infrastructure, industrial, commercial, housing, and the like over the years. And so it's an investment program. And some of the key differences, as we'll get into, there are bigger investment rewards for rural communities in this, and there are significantly more flexible investment timelines. The new Opportunity Zone 2.0 program I would refer to as more of a patient capital program. It's one where really, from an investment standpoint, it gives more time for an investor and a project to get lined up correctly. For those of you in the economic development world, that can be tricky. And so the Opportunity Zone 2.0 program is more of a patient capital program. We can go to the next slide. So the timeline is the fact there was an update to this timeline just this week, but the timeline is the program was made permanent last year. We're in this window right now of taking public feedback. In fact, we'll probably go all the way through May of probably mid-May of this year to take public feedback, because July 1, all governors begin nominating new census tracts for opportunity zones. So again, the governor gets to nominate 25% of the eligible census tracts. Then U.S. Treasury takes a look at our recommendations. And by January 1, they give us the thumbs up, say, hey, we're good to go, that our recommendations are good. And those census tracts that we nominate, that the governor nominates, become opportunity zones for the new 2.0 investment rules, January 1, 2027. For those of you who are familiar with the original Opportunity Zone program, it doesn't go away. There's actually going to be a 2-year overlap period. So the current opportunity zones, and this is really important for if you're in an opportunity zone or working in a project in an opportunity zone today, and either maybe it's no longer eligible, maybe because as Mark and Sharon have been talking about, maybe that community has elevated out of that generational poverty situation, or perhaps it's either just not chosen or not eligible for some other reason. There's still a 2-year overlap period. So those opportunity zones will persist from the 1.0 program all the way through the end of calendar year 2028, while the new program begins calendar year 2027. So there's a 2-year overlap. And that April 6th date, just this week, so just 3 days ago, U.S. Treasury officially published the official list of eligible census tracts, which is very, very helpful. We'll talk more about that. We've had a theoretical list. It turned out our theoretical list was pretty close to the real list. And so now we have official census tracts that we know are officially eligible. We can go to the next slide. So I won't spend a lot of time on these slides, but the crux of it is that essentially the funds from capital, the sale of capital gains, that is essentially how an investor puts together funding, invests in a qualified opportunity fund, and then directs those funds to a capital investment in a community and derives the tax payments from it. There's a long list, as you can see, of eligible capital gains. If you go to the next slide, you'll see the types of projects that Congress and President Trump are hoping that communities will invest in. You do also see some ineligible projects, so that's important too. The first Opportunity Zone 1.0 program, it turned out most of the investing focused on housing, and so Congress tried to make some tweaks in the law, that patient capital approach that I mentioned. Congress tried to make some tweaks in the law to hopefully see more industrial, commercial, other types of investments, not just housing investments, because every community is a little bit different in terms of the needs that it has. So really the new program is set up to try to diversify those investments in both the type of investment and geographically where those investments occur. And if you go to the next slide, the bottom line of the Opportunity Zone program is that it gives the investor a tax reduction. It gives the investor the ability to defer paying taxes and use those capital gains as a way to generate additional investment, jobs, create additional money, opportunity, and then ultimately at some point the tax bill comes due. But in the meantime, that investor has helped invest significantly in a community and created wealth and opportunity and jobs, hopefully for many, many people. So ultimately, it's a tax deferral program. The tax deferral is 3 times the benefit for rural communities. That is one of the more significant opportunities, is that rural communities, the investors have 3 times the potential tax deferral for investing in a rural community. We can go to the next slide. I mentioned earlier that we just found out this week the official list of census tracts. To compare the 1.0 program to the 2.0 program, I also mentioned, of course, the income threshold. The income threshold for the program is a little more narrow. And so in the 1.0 program, at the time it was Governor Scott, the state of Florida had 1,708 eligible census tracts. Governor Scott got to pick 427 of them. The new list that we just got, we actually got this right on the nose. We thought we'd have about 1,360 eligible census tracts. That's in fact exactly what we have. So Governor DeSantis will get to pick 340 eligible census tracts. I will tell you, there are a couple key differences though, beyond the income threshold. In the 1.0 program, states were allowed to pick neighboring census tracts that were not on the surface ineligible, but they were next to an eligible census tract. We cannot do that this time around in the new program. Also in the new program, there is some wiggle room that the U.S. Treasury Department issued this release saying that if we want to make a case for a census tract, because statistically maybe it's just on the margins of being eligible. That data comes from the ACS, the American Community Survey that the Census Bureau does every year. And that data is a model. It's not perfect. And so the Treasury Department is giving states the ability to nominate a census tract that does not appear eligible, but we can make the case for it if we think that actually it should be eligible. So there is a little teeny wiggle room in some cases. But ultimately, Governor DeSantis on July 1 will get to nominate 340 census tracts, and we're in the process right now trying to figure out, what those are and really what the stories are behind each one of them. We can go to the next slide. this is where it really comes back to this conversation around the Florida Gap Map and childhood poverty. So there's two types of ways that we're trying to really align. Ultimately, if you think about the job that I have, we somewhere around the end of May, early June, we'll be sitting down with the governor saying, here are the ideas that Floridians have for census tracts that should be nominated. And here are themes that we tried to really adopt and marry up this task to, because we as a state, we have these critical designations, and you'll see in a couple slides that we have this critical, I mean, many types of critical infrastructure that we as a state have said, private sector, public sector, various types of partnerships. We have said these designations, these infrastructure, they're very critical to being a centerpiece for community, job creation, catalytic moments that elevate communities and change communities. And so we should use these. And some of these are married up in law. Some of these are, as you see on the screen, the Florida Chamber's initiative regarding childhood poverty and addressing that issue. And so we decided at the outset, and Mark and the team were gracious enough to serve on an initial working group that we put together just to get this initiative started. And we decided day one that this was going to be a key pillar of this, because it really does marry up perfectly in terms of addressing childhood poverty and what an opportunity zone is supposed to be. And so, of course, you can see we have some other critical designations. We have a lot of very specific things about rural communities in Florida law, and we've engaged a lot of rural communities very, very significantly already. You know, one I put on here too, because I think it's critically important too, and it came up earlier, is food security or addressing food insecurity. Another key way to look at opportunity zones is a way to turn around and create, again, multi-generational change and elevating a community. We can go to the next slide. We're also, as I mentioned, trying to align this effort with the critical infrastructure we have in the state. We're a big infrastructure state, and that's something that is important to, I think, to keep in mind, because our seaports, our airports, our spaceports, our intermodals, our educational institutions, our 12 universities, 28 state colleges, 48 technical colleges, they are all hubs for those communities. Not just our commercial service airports, but even our many rural county airports. Our public use airports throughout the state are really oftentimes the hubs of where job creation occur in many communities. And so in many cases, we can use this opportunity zone strategy to, again, to rally around those critical designations, but also those critical infrastructure points where we know there's already efforts existing to create jobs, and we can really catalyze those and try to accelerate those. Just if you look at the next slide, this is just a good view. And this is just the seaport, airport, military base, spaceport, and multimodal view. But if you added educational institutions on here, you wouldn't actually be able to physically see the state. But we are a big infrastructure state. And so it's very important. It's very important for us to leverage those points. And again, try to really leverage those job hubs that we have, which are spread throughout the state, urban and rural communities. And you can see, even if you take some of the rural communities, you see those job creation hubs along the different transportation corridors. If we go to the next slide, and now I'll dive into really how to participate in the process. So first, I've got a few slides, floridajobs.org/opportunity zones. That is our website. We have a lot of great information there. We have a longer version of this presentation there. So if you want the full deep dive that our team gives, and I should say we've got a couple great team members on with us today. We've got Ben Latham, who leads, he's our point of contact for this opportunity zone effort, and his contact info is at the end of this PowerPoint. So Ben Latham's on. We've got Deputy Secretary Jason Mahone also on this PowerPoint. As a matter of course, both of them are actually in communities today giving presentations, one in Leon County and one in Okeechobee County, I'm sorry, not Okeechobee County, Broward County, on this exact effort. So they're on the road today, dialing in from the road. But you can go to this page, you can sign up for our updates, you can actually submit recommendations for opportunity zones at this page. You'll see a survey there. That is actually really a submission form is really what it is. You submit recommendations through that form, and you can then learn about the opportunity zones. There are a couple maps on the site. Since we just got the official updates from the Census Bureau this week, we're going to be updating those maps. That link there that says potential high impact opportunity zone candidate tracks, that one actually has the Florida Gap Map zip codes loaded into it. So if you go look at that, you will see if a census tract has one of the zip codes that you're talking about today loaded into it. So if somebody picks that census tract, you know they are targeting a zip code where child poverty is at the highest in the state. So it's a great way to tackle both issues at the same time. There's a lot of great information there, including our calendar. We can go to the next slide. This next slide, I definitely won't read the details. These are the presentations we've done. And we've been busy. We've been busy for a while now, getting in front of a lot of groups and organizations. So please, we're not shy about getting on the road more or doing a Teams call or Zoom call, whatever works for you. If you go to the next slide, you'll see the meetings that we have coming up. And we keep adding to this list. And you see we're trying to bring it in for a landing about mid-May, because we've got to then brief the governor thereafter and say, these are the recommendations Floridians have given us. And then if you just go to the last slide, again, you've got our link here, my contact info, Ben Latham. I mentioned him earlier. He's leading this effort for us. Again, if you go to the site, you've got the QR codes there, the program page, the survey, and really it is a publicly community-driven process. We're closing in on about 200 recommendations that we've already received. And I expect that number is only going to continue to climb. So again, I think I'm probably way over my allotted time. Mark, I want to turn it back to you, sir. And thank you for this opportunity.
All right, Alex, Secretary Kelly, thank you so very much, not only for our partnership, but thank you for leaning in with us on our Prosperity Initiative. I think you make the point all the time that, getting kids out of poverty and opportunity zones and economic development, it's all part of the same mission that Florida's on. So thank you so much for your partnership, Alex, and thanks for sharing a little bit. We did have some questions. We'll follow up with you offline later. I know Skip Alford and others had some questions, so we'll follow up with you. But Mr. Secretary, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, next up, we're going to hear from a couple of our partners now in this. So Florida Blue, as I mentioned earlier, Michelle Hamilton is an executive with Florida Blue, and she also serves on our advisory board for the Florida Prosperity Initiative. Florida Blue, Dr. Tice was actually on the cover of Florida Trend not all that long ago, talking about what Florida Blue is doing. And so we've got amazing companies in Florida making a big difference. And Michelle, thanks for preparing this today, and thanks for sharing a little bit about what you're doing. And the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mark. I'm excited to join you today and share a little bit about Florida Blue and our parent company GuideWell's efforts to address poverty at the zip code level through our Growing Resilient Communities initiative. GuideWell and Florida Blue share a mission, which is to help people and communities achieve better health. We believe everyone deserves access to quality, affordable, and equitable healthcare. And the health of an individual is deeply connected to the health of their community. Social determinants play a crucial role in shaping health outcomes. And we know that when individuals have stable housing, strong educational foundations, and reliable food sources, they're better equipped to manage their healthcare needs, which that ties directly to our mission, which again is to help people and communities achieve better health. So back in 2021, Florida Blue set out to break the cycle of generational poverty in targeted under-resourced zip codes in Florida's major markets. We began by looking at the areas that had the highest percentage of children living in poverty. Generational poverty, as we heard a little while ago, is a significant issue in Florida. It impacts over 700,000 children. And children living in poverty are more susceptible to developmental delays, academic setbacks, abuse, and health issues. So we believe that by addressing the root causes, we can create a brighter future for these children and their families. So to get a better understanding of where this issue was most prevalent, we turned to the Florida Chamber Foundation's incredible tool, the Florida Gap Map. The data in the Gap Map helps us to target our investments to specific neighborhoods and address the unique challenges in each area. So on this slide that you see here, we've identified 6 zip codes as targeted communities, and the map illustrates our focused zip codes and our key partners in each area. So starting at the top, our partners include Lift Jax in Duval County, Lift Orlando in Orange County, the Urban League of Broward County, the Allapattah Collaborative CDC in Miami-Dade County, and the University Area CDC in Hillsborough County. And then the chart on this slide shows the zip code, the region, the county, and the number and percentage of children living in poverty in each of our designated areas. And over the past 5 years, we've been working hard to build a strong foundation and partner and invest in these communities and develop strategies that will really maximize our impact. Once we determined our areas and our key partners, it was really important for us to understand what initiatives were already in place in each area, and then also understand the gaps, which would then help inform our approach. So we brought together a cross-sector collaboration that includes government agencies, nonprofit organizations, faith-based institutes, local businesses, and community members. Each of the communities are at different stages of the transformation, and they're building on existing initiatives and making progress in their own ways. So now that we've talked about the importance of addressing the social determinants of health, I wanted to talk about how we're evaluating the effectiveness of our initiative and making data-driven decisions that will help drive this initiative forward. So even though each zip code is unique and different in their own way, we knew we needed some shared metrics to measure our progress. So we looked at data that was available through the Florida Gap Map, and we thought about what we were trying to accomplish as an organization and what our partners are trying to do. And we determined 4 areas of measurement. So those include housing burden, unemployment rate, childhood poverty, and 3rd grade reading scores. We also know each of the partners has its own strengths and priorities. So we worked with the partners to also determine custom goals for each organization that's relevant to their specific work. And we're using the Florida Chamber Gap Map to track our progress and look for areas where we can continue to improve and invest. And we're seeing good news in quite a few of these areas. We're seeing some improvement in childhood poverty, 3rd grade reading scores, and unemployment rate in our targeted areas. So we take these learnings and we look for different opportunities to invest in programs that could help impact the areas that need a little more attention. I know I just probably have a minute or two, but I do want to leave you guys with one example of how the Florida Gap Map has informed our investments. So when we looked at this data last year, we weren't seeing the same improvements in 3rd grade reading that we're seeing now. So we looked at partners that we have that might be able to help us in this area. And we work with a great organization in Central Florida called the Reed Charitable Foundation. They're an organization that is committed to improving literacy outcomes for students. And we provided support for a program called Ready, Set, Read. And it's a proactive literacy initiative that addresses low reading proficiency in young children. So our investment is supporting 7 early learning centers in zip code 32805, which is in Orange County. And the preliminary reporting for the first half of the school year showed students were making significant gains. More than half the students served by this program are reaching their kindergarten literacy benchmarks almost a full year early. So the idea is that by establishing a solid foundation in early childhood education, we're setting the stage for these kids for future academic success. So that's one example of how we can address some of these root causes through the information that's available to us through the Florida Gap Map. And that will help us create lasting impact, and we hope that will be felt for generations to come. So I'd like to thank the Florida Chamber Foundation for allowing me to share a little bit about Florida Blue's efforts to improve health outcomes across Florida communities. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Mark.
All right, Michelle, wow, thank you so very much. I think everybody just saw why we wanted to put you on stage today. What Florida Blue is doing is really pretty amazing. So, Michelle, thank you for that. Next up, I'm going to turn it over to another one of our leaders that needs no introduction. But David Odehowski is the president and CEO of the Edith Bush Charitable Foundation. He's also the chair of the Florida Chamber Foundation's Community Development Partnership, which are Florida's leading companies who want to put the long term ahead of the short term and figure out how do we align our philanthropy to the differences that we can make a big impact on. And so, David, thank you so much for your leadership. And I'm going to turn it over to you. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Mark, and for the Chamber team, I'm going to be editing my remarks. At the Edith Bush Charitable Foundation, our work begins with a simple but demanding belief that every child, no matter what their zip code, deserves the opportunity to thrive. And I want to be clear that at the outset that childhood poverty is not a social issue for nonprofits alone. It's not a policy issue for government alone, or it's not a compliance issue for business alone. It's a systems issue, and the systems only change when we work together and have collective impact. So childhood poverty is not evenly distributed. It clusters, it compounds, and it persists across generations. And this is why the Florida Gap Map is indispensable. It's not an abstract policy tool. It's a business intelligent dashboard for human potential. It's a business intelligent dashboard for human potential. It shows county by county, neighborhood by neighborhood, where children lack access to the fundamentals that predict long-term success, like stable housing, early learning, healthcare, family-sustaining wages, and more. If you look at the gap map, something important happens. Poverty stops being theoretical. You can see where the children are being left behind, and they're located often next to places where there's economic prosperity. And this is where the Florida scorecard comes in and why it should matter deeply to this audience. The scorecard does what business leaders demand. It measures progress. It tracks indicators over time and across the region so we can see what's moving the needle and what is being stalled. The scorecard actually shifts the conversation from are we trying to is it working? And that shift from activity to outcomes is where business leadership can play a big role. So what does it mean as a business leader? Well, first, your voice matters. Collective impact requires shared priorities, and businesses have the credibility to elevate childhood poverty as an economic urgency, not just a moral one. Second, your expertise matters. Data analytics, operational discipline, talent development, long-term planning are all areas where business can strengthen cross-sector solution. Third, your engagement matters as employers, as investors, and as civic partners. Businesses that support family-sustaining wages, flexible schedules, childcare solutions, education and career pipelines are not doing charity. They're protecting the future of Florida's workforce. The Florida Gap Map tells us where to act. The Florida Scorecard tells us whether it's working. And collective impact tells us how we succeed. If we can do this together, business, government, and philanthropy, we can assure that Florida's prosperity is not just visible, but available to all Floridians, and not just growing, but enduring for generations to come. Thank you for your leadership, Mark, and thank you for everyone on this call for being part of the solution.
All right. Well, David, again, you just proved why you're the chair of our statewide effort, Community Development Partnership. So thank you so much for your words there, for you and Michelle both. Our final speaker, and we appreciate Senator Claudiu joining us today and for her patience here as we've gotten through our program. I have to tell you, Senator Claudiu, who's going to round out our program here, we had lunch a couple months ago. We were both speakers at United Way's Alice Summit in Miami. And I was blown away. You know, you can tell a lot about people by what they do when no one's watching. And Senator Claudiu works around the world as a volunteer on issues that no one would ever know about unless you asked her about it. But right here in Florida, just for perspective, if you don't know her, she is a lifetime A-rated legislator by the Florida Chamber, which means she's aligned at what we're trying to do here. She's also a two-time Distinguished Advocate Award winner, which is a hard award to get. That means she's gone above and beyond in her advocacy for what's happening in her district. And so we thought it would be amazing to have her with her leadership be on the line today to talk a little bit about her perspective of how we can help her, but also why this matters. So, Senator, thanks for your patience, and thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mark. And congratulations on what the foundation is putting together that can act as the basis and the data-driven policy recommendations that the legislature moves forward on. So I think I, as a committed Republican who wants to see families reach their highest potential, not just mom and dads, but children, Floridians have the opportunity to become everything they can be. I know the foundations of that are the building blocks that we're talking about today. And it does take all of us, whether you're in the private sector, you're in the nonprofit sector, or the partners in the public sector. We have to be working in tandem to reimagine systems that I think at their core, Mark and I love talking about this, at their core, help the American dream and the American promise have continued relevance in modern society. As a 32-year-old elected official, I can walk around South Florida and hear the story of people asking how long they should be thinking about living in Miami, or should they move out of state? Does it make more economic sense to find housing that's half the cost somewhere else? So our initiatives in the legislature during the 4 years that I've had the privilege to represent Miami-Dade County in the Florida Senate have been incredibly focused on building better systems of affordability. I'll talk about several that I have played a role as sponsors in, but I also really want to lean forward into what is our shared work into the future. The Senate has advanced the Live Local Act now for 4 legislative sessions, in which we have found new pathways to incentivize the private sector and the market rate developing community to engage, invest, and reconsider the commercial mixed use and industrial zone property across the state to have at least 40% workforce component in all new developments that they put forward. We've made $711 million in investments first year, and subsequently hundreds of millions of dollars of investments the last 3 years in new investments, gap financing programs, infrastructure programs that are focused around this new workforce housing component statewide. We've created a tax abatement program called the Missing Middle Property Tax Exemption that's lowered market rate rent across the state, 10% for our workforce, which is 80 to 120% of area median income. We're talking about at least 15,000 units a year are reduced below market rate for our workforce through this program. We've also invested in the Hometown Heroes Down Payment Assistance Program to the tune of $100 million a year, and this past year, $50 million. We're working when budget reopens to continue making strategic investments. What this is doing is providing first-time home buyers across Florida that make between 80 and 120% of area median income the opportunity to access $35,000 down payment assistance at 0% interest as a second mortgage or a third. These are programs that make the American dream of homeownership and the ability for incredible people in our communities to live in the communities that they serve. Tandem, and equally important, is our work in ensuring that public servants can live in the communities they serve. We expanded the Live Local Act this year to include land use entitlement preemptions of greater height, density, and floor area ratio to municipal and county-owned property, as well as school districts. I've met with the 8 largest land superintendents across the state over the course of this session to encourage them and empower them as soon as this legislation is, God willing, signed by the governor, for them to consider their entire real estate portfolios. Some of them are the largest real estate portfolios in their county, to consider how to develop school board staff housing across their communities and help us address the workforce recruitment and retention challenge we have, not just for teachers, but school personnel across the public education system. We also want to see the same engagement for our firefighters, for our sheriffs, and the opportunity to provide for law enforcement officers affordability, deep affordability for their housing in the communities that they serve. Similar aligned, and it's been mentioned many times, is the cost of childcare. I've worked diligently in the Senate to create a depth of understanding, not just within past leadership, but in future leadership, of the need to expand income eligibility and to have a more measured approach on how we engage with working families. Last year, we increased the income eligibility for the school readiness scholarship program for low-income families to have access to childcare from 150% of federal poverty level to about 58% of state median income. It was a modest increase, and our goal and ambition is to make sure that mom and dads are not making the hard decision to refuse either for one of the couple to work or to refuse a promotion because of these thresholds that maintain their ability to access childcare and be a part of the workforce. The Chamber has done such important work in outlining the reality of this for both a lot of workers and a lot of companies. We have continued work in making strategic general revenue investments into the future, into early childhood education, and making sure that we secure the program as it exists. 3 years ago, we created the School Readiness Plus program, which catches families that are already eligible for the school readiness scholarship program and are finding themselves exiting the program and still not able to yet fully afford the cost of childcare. We created the School Readiness program that provides a supplemental scholarship until they reach 100% of state median income, which would be economic self-sufficiency. That is kind of the core value we have in this prosperity initiative work, as well as the goal to uplift children out of the generational poverty, a reality that a lot of families have continued to live in Florida. Our shared goal is to make sure that these tremendous cost drivers for affordability are systematically understood and tackled, zip code by zip code and statewide policy by statewide policy. To me, those are two of the most important pressing challenges that we have for Florida. And I am deeply committed to continuing the work of affordable and workforce housing and exponentially increasing the amount of housing stock we have available at these lower costs. Similarly, we have to continue making strides and building depth of understanding and depth of commitment from the incoming leadership from the House and the Senate on greater early childhood education investment and greater access to childcare for workforce. That's going to take work of all of us to impress upon the dire need to make sure that our workforce isn't stalled, isn't making choices that are family first instead of longevity of family first. I have to make sure that I can go to work rather than I have to make sure I'm building for the future of my family. And so it is incredibly important to me and my team, the information, the data, the research, the partnership of the Chamber Foundation. And it is important for the work that we're doing today, we've done in the past, and that we have to continue doing into the future to make sure Florida is positioned to continue its economic ascent. Thank you so much for the opportunity to join you all today.
Yeah, Senator, thank you so very much for your insights and for your partnership. There were some comments in the chat from people thanking you for your leadership and for caring about this issue. So let me just echo the thoughts of our members. So thank you very much. And I know you're trying to join us for our June 9 summit in person. So everybody's going to get a chance to meet you and hear a little bit more and ask you questions there at the summit as well. So I really, really appreciate you sticking with us today and sharing perspective. To have not all 40 senators are on board with this, but to have you in the lead and really helping us bring the data and the gaps to the Florida Senate so that we can keep Florida moving in the right direction. We really appreciate your leadership with us here on the Prosperity Initiative at the Florida Chamber. So thank you very much, Senator.
It's a joy. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So as I round us out and bring this in for a landing, so to speak, I Let me first, I want to thank the hundreds of you who joined us from all over Florida today. Really encouraged by the comments in the chat. And let me just acknowledge there's a lot of great work that's happening in all parts of Florida, right? We talk about there are pockets of excellence and we need patterns of excellence. And so for all of you who are joining our effort and have shared what you're working on, we promise to illuminate it. We want to replicate it in other zip codes and in other counties. That's what Heather and Christina are working on a frontline basis. I want to thank all of you who spoke today, right? So Alexis and Michelle, David, Karen, Alex Kelly, Sheridan, and I want to thank Heather Kogar and Christina Donahue for all the work that went into putting today's presentation together as well. Want to remind everybody 2 months from today, June 9, we will sell out. We'll be in Tampa for our annual Prosperity Initiative. And again, if we could go back a slide, please. I want to remind everybody also, 983 zip codes. We need companies to be zip code leaders in all 983 zip codes. And you saw we have, State Farm, we have First Federal Bank, we have Florida Blue, we have Maximus. We have so many companies who are stepping forward. We have state colleges. Tallahassee State College has adopted their zip code. So this is really picking up momentum, which is why we've doubled our team. And so become a zip code leader. Join our advisory board. You can contact Christina. Her information's right there on the screen. And then, of course, bring your team to the June 9 summit. We'll have the Federal Reserve speaking. All of our advisory board members are going to speak, so you'll get to hear a little bit more of what you heard today. All but one, I think, are going to make the trip. Our Attorney General, James Uthmeyer, you'll hear Heather Kogar share her story, the Florida Sheriff's Association, and we're going to cover all 10 of the root causes in terms of what are the leading ideas and what solutions can you bring back to your community that are working in other communities. And so with that said, again, I want to thank everybody. I know it took hours of preparation, even for just a little bit over an hour-long conversation. This Prosperity Initiative is part of the Florida 2030 Blueprint. It's such an important initiative. David Odahowski, thank you for leading our community development partnership. I know that's a growing program. More and more companies are realizing that we can do a lot more together than anybody can on their own. So the collective impact model that you're leading really matters. And Michelle and Karen, thank you for your leadership. Lots of questions in the chat. People want to know if we're going to send the presentation out. Yes, we will. We'll send it out to everybody in the follow-up from today. Our team is ridiculously accessible. So if you want to talk to Heather about a prosperity roundtable in your county, we have them coming up in Alachua, Jackson County, Brevard, all over the place. Southwest Florida, I think we're doing 5 of them this year. And so if you're interested in learning more about your zip code or your county, give Heather an outreach. If you want to know about serving on the advisory board or participating in the conference, by all means, reach out to Christina. Everyone can always reach out to me. This is an incredibly important initiative for our country, and very proud to be part of something that Florida's doing that other states are looking at and say, how can we do what you're doing in Florida? Again, thank everybody for joining us today. We so appreciate it. Everybody be safe. God bless, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody.